Hello everyone, welcome back to another lesson, starting section 3 here. And in this section we're going to be focusing more about rules, how to create them, etc. So, like I've said in a previous video, I recommend working with the Use Case Manager application, and it does come with the Curator installation, but as you can see I uninstalled it from my deployment in order to show you guys how to install it manually. So if we go to Google right here, we can search for Use Case Manager, and we can go to this link right here, right? And it says that the deployment version needs to be higher than 7.4.1, which is good because we have 7.5, and you can see the latest version uploaded on February 13th, which is not too long ago. And you don't need to have an account. You can create one for free on IBM's website. I'm just gonna click on download right here. And it's downloading the application. And once it's done, we can go to the admin tab, go to extension management, click on add, browse for the application, open it, and tick install immediately, right? And that's gonna upload the application and start the installation process. Now, I do want to point out that you can download the application from the App Store, which is inside of Curator, but I don't prefer to use it most of the time because I like to do everything manually, make sure that there's no, conflicts between different applications. So you can do that, but I mostly prefer to do it on the manual side. So we're just going to give it a few seconds here to install. And once we have done that, we do need to configure it for a first-time run, which I will show you as well on how to do. And just give it a few moments here. And meanwhile, actually, I'll show you what we need to do in order to configure it. So in Curator, there's something called an authorized services token. Right, you can find this button right here under user management. And for almost every application or every API service that you have interacting with Curator, you have to configure a token. So let's go ahead and click on add right here. I'm going to call it Use Case Manager. You can go ahead and give it a security profile of admin and user role admin as well. I would not set an expiration date because this is an application. I want it to be running all the time. Go ahead and hit save. And it's important to note that once you close this window, you cannot see the token again. So make sure you copy it, right? I'll put it in a notepad just to be safe. Okay. Now we can go ahead and close it and close the window. And let's see if our application is finished installing. It did. So you can go ahead, hit OK, close this window, and now we can refresh your deployment. And you can see that you have a new tab here, the Use Case Manager. So once I go into the Use Case Manager, it's telling me that the app has not been configured yet. So let's go to the admin configuration page. And you see that it is asking us to input a service token. So let's paste our created token from earlier, hit submit. And now you can see that the authorized service token added successfully. And speaking specifically about Use Case Manager, it needs to do some initial startup in order to synchronize your existing rules and mappings and such. So you're gonna see here 0, 0, right? So if we hit refresh again and go to Use Case Manager again, it's displaying that it's showing partial results while the app is updating the report, right? So we can currently see we only have 90 rules shown, which is not the actual number. We have a few hundreds, I think. But for now, it's fine. Let it load in the background. So this is the application I work with most of the time when I'm dealing with rules, which is fantastic. And the reason is, well, first of all, because the user interface is way more nice, clean, and intuitive. But also you can have filters. You can filter by if the rule enabled, if it's a rule or a building block, which I'm gonna cover in a few moments here. And you have all of those filters you can use in order to filter down your search rules, which is fantastic in my opinion. So once we have that installed, let's go ahead and create a test rule in order to see how an offense is generated, right? So the first thing we need to do, we need to know when we are dealing with rules is that we have something called a rule and we have something that's called a building block. And the main difference between those two, right, is that a building block is basically the exact same thing as a rule, but it does not have an action associated with it. So if you guys have a bit of background with programming, for example, you can treat building block as detection functions. So why would we want to use something like this? Is let's say, for example, you have a base condition that you want to use in many rules. So instead of writing it all the time by hand, you can just use a building block that you have created, which is like a function, and use that instead of writing your entire detection over and over again. Okay, so let's go ahead and click the plus button right here and event or flow. And we're going to be shown this window. You can click next. Choose event, hit next. And we have this window right here. And in this window, we have all of the blocks that we can use when creating our rules. There's quite a decent amount of here. Most of the time you would use the same ones over and over again. These are the most important ones. And we're gonna, as the course progresses, we're gonna see more and more usage of different building blocks and tests, right? So each of those lines is called a test. So let's get started and create our first building block. And let's say, for example, I want to make a building block that will detect events that are only coming from my Windows endpoints. Okay, so how would I do that? So we can go to the filter at the top of the screen right here and go ahead and type in log source type. And we get those two results. I'm going to click the first one on the plus right here. And now basically our first test is going to be and, which we can change to and not. Let's leave it at and. When the event were detected by one or more of these log source types. So I'm going to open this one and type in Windows. And we can see that we have Windows security event log, which is what we are looking for. I'm going to click add and submit. So basically what I have right now is a building block that is going to target events that are only coming from my Windows endpoints. Just doing this for as an example. It's not necessarily a practical need, but for our purposes, it's more than enough. So I'm gonna go right to the right side here and click export as building block. And I'm gonna give it a name. Usually I like to prefix my building block with $B, colon, and then let's do Windows and point events. Okay, and we're gonna hit on save. And the building block has been created. So now we can use that building block in every rule that we have that is targeting Windows. And you can, of course, add more filters and tunings to the building block to make it more specific to your needs. However, for this quick example, this is more than enough. So in order to use the building block, go back to our filter and type in rule, okay? I'm going to select the first test here. And when the event matches any, and we can change this to any or all, I'm going to click any on this one, of the following rules. So like I said before, a building block is a rule, but it doesn't have an action associated with it. So if you click on the rules, it's going to open a window here, and we can type in the name of our building block. Windows endpoint events. I'm going to click on add, click on submit. And now our rule is using that building block. So basically, instead of writing use logs from Windows, we can just reference this building block. And it's also a great advantage because instead of, if you have edits to your rules in the future, you can just edit the building block you created instead of editing each rule one by one. So it saves you a lot of time and keeps your use case library organized. Okay. And let's say, for example, I would like to detect certain types of events. So I'm going to leave this window open right here. And I'm going to duplicate my QRadar deployment. And let's see what kind of events are being streamed to our deployment so we can detect on them. So I would aggregate by log source. I'll select my Windows machine here. And we can see all of those events. Okay, so let's choose one of them by count. If we aggregate by event name, we can see that the most noisy event right here is basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They have the same count. So we can choose any of those. For example, I'm going to select, let's do this one, right? Yeah, this one. Double click it in order to display only those events. And let's see what we have here. Okay, so you have a lot of ways to do this, okay? But my recommendation is to use either event ID, which this one is not unique to the event itself. It's unique per log, so I would prefer not to use it. But you can use something called a QID, right? A QID is a QRadar ID. A QID is basically a unique identifier for an event. So for this purpose, I'm going to use the QID. However, when you are dealing with rules that can use many types of events, then using QID would limit you to only one certain event type, which is not a good idea. For example, if you would like to have a rule that alerts on a category, for example, a category of events like authentication or firewall events, you would not use the QID because it limits you heavily only to one event. So you would use different criteria. But because I know that for our current example, I want to catch only this event name, only this one and nothing else, okay? Only this one and nothing else. So I can safely copy the QID right here and go back to our use case manager. And now I'm gonna filter for QID. All right, select the first option. And when the event QID is one of the following. So I'm gonna click on the QIDs, paste my ID, hit search, and it's found our event. So I'm gonna mark it. Bit bigger and click add right here, the right side of the screen. And now if we scroll down, we can see that it's added to the selected item. So I can go ahead, hit submit. And that's basically our first rule. So let's do a quick recap. We are saying that the first condition in order to trigger this rule is to make sure that it's only coming from Windows endpoints. And then after you filter down all of the Windows events, look for this kind of event. Now, the reason we are doing it this way is we need to think about QRadar logs as a funnel, right? So the more you go up, the larger your volume. As the funnel shrinks down, the less your volume. So you want to like filter out all of the unnecessary events at the beginning. So for example, if I were to remove this first test, QRadar would have to go ahead and search every log source type in order to find this specific event. However, I am telling QRadar in advance, hey, you don't need to search every log source type. I am telling you only to search under event logs, Windows event logs. which saves a lot of time and performance on the backend. So the more specific your rules are going to be and more filtered down, the faster that they are going to operate. So let's go ahead and give it out a name. Let's do Windows activation request sent to KMS. Okay, let's copy the name. You can assign it to a group here. I wouldn't do that right now. And then we can go ahead and do next. And this window is very important, okay? Because this window, you basically create your action, your response, your limiter, okay? So let's go ahead and see what kind of options we have here. So if you want to set severity, credibility, and relevance scores when this offense triggers, you can do that right here. Change it to whichever you like. I usually don't work with those kind of metrics, but you can definitely do that. And you want to go ahead and mark that ensure the detected event is part of an offense. And now you need to select what index to use, right? So how QRadar works is when you have offenses triggering, it indexes all of the events that contributed to the offense under the same custom property. So for example, if I choose to index on source IP, right, what would happen, assuming I have two offenses, right? Let's assume that this rule that we're building right now has triggered two offenses. And one of the events in offense number 1 is using a source IP. And one of the events in offense number 2 is using another source IP. So each event is going to be assigned to its own offense because we chose to index by source IP. However, if we would choose another field, for example, if we select username, what would happen is that even if both of the events have a different username, but they have this different source IP, and they have the same username, they would create only one offense because the username is the same, even though the source IP is different. So this field is basically saying aggregate my offenses based on the following property. And we're going to see more examples of this in later parts of the course. But for now, in order to keep it simple, I would just select source IP right here as a default. And in this section, in rule response, we can select different kind of actions, different kind of responses to trigger when the rule fires. So you can create a new event, you can email someone, you can forward the event to different destination, you can add the data to a reference set, remove the data from a reference set, and we're gonna go ahead and use different combination of responses when we get to the relevant sections in the course. But for now, in order to keep it simple, the most used response is to dispatch a new event, right? So let's go ahead and type in the name of our rule, which we copied from the previous screen. And in here, you can change your category. I usually don't change those. Again, you can do that. There's no right or wrong. It depends how you work, how your organization works. I usually just leave it at default. And in here, you want to ensure that the event that is being dispatched is part of an offense. So we're going to see in a few moments here how all of this comes down together to an actual alert. So make sure that your index here and your index here are the same, because if it won't, it will just generate multiple different alerts. So you want the index to be the same. And offense naming is basically whether or not information from the event should change the name of the alert itself. So for example, if I choose the first option, this information should contribute to the name of the associated offense. It's basically going to use different parameters from the event in the name of the offense. I usually, again, I choose the middle options because this should be static information, right? I want my event name to be the same in all of the offenses. It's just my preference. It keeps everything unified, but you can, of course, play around with the different kind of options to see which one you prefer the most. But for our example, I'm going to leave it as the middle option right here. And you can configure something called a response limiter. So for example, if you want this offense to trigger only once per day, once per hour, you can change it in here, and you can also limit it by a certain property. So I can go ahead and say, hey, I want this offense to trigger only once per day, for example, by the source IP, right? So if I have two offenses within one day, and both of them have the same source IP, the second one is not going to trigger. But if it has a different source IP, it is going to trigger. So this is great if you want to limit your offenses. For now, I'm not gonna mark this one, and I'm gonna enable the rule. Once we do that, we can go ahead and click on finish. Okay, and the rule is created. If you go ahead and refresh our application and sort by creation date, and mark a rule here, we can see that our new rule is found here, alongside with some information about it. So now let's go back to log activity and take a look at the events that being sent to QRadar in order to find when the next event that we are looking for is triggering our offense. So in our case, we choose the activation request sent to key management service. So I'm going to go ahead, right click, and filter on only this event to be shown to me. And we can see that we still, this event triggered. Let's display default. Okay. So if we sort by time, we can see the last time. Oh, sorry. Go ahead and do last 5 minutes again. And yeah, so we can see by the time pattern that every minute, this event is triggering every single minute. So it shouldn't take too long in order for our alert to trigger. So if we go on ahead and select offenses, we can already see that we have an offense, right? Because it found out the event that we were looking for. It saw the rule that we have, and it said, oh, okay, so you want to find out this event? Yeah, I create an alert for it. So if you go ahead and double click, we can see some basic information about our offense. So we can see the description that we have set it in the use case manager. We can see the source and the destination IP. We can see username if it had any. And we can also see the network, and you can name your networks as well. We're going to cover that in different parts of the course as well. But usually what we are looking for is this line right here, the event and flow count. So if you see, we have 4 events that contributed to the offense. So if you go ahead and open those, we are going to see these 2 events, right? And the reason it's at 4 is because it considered the custom rule engine event to be an event as well. And what is a custom rule engine? This log source is basically your ECS EP service being run in order to generate this event. So if you go ahead and just enter this one, we can't see too much useful information. We just see the name of the of our rule, and you can cancel this. You know, if you don't want to generate a custom rule engine event, you can go ahead to use case manager, right, and edit the rule by clicking here, and you can edit by going to your response window here, and you need to cancel out this part right here. Ensure that the dispatched event is part of an offense. And if you do that, it's not going to generate a custom rule engine event. But usually I just leave it as it is right here, because I do find them to be helpful if you want to, for example, create a rule that triggers on one of those events, so you can do that. So I just leave it open for most of the time, but of course there's no black or white here. You can customize it to your own needs. So let's go ahead back to our offenses and open up the events again. And we can see that we have two more events added, a few more. Custom rule engine, and one of custom rule engine and one from our Windows endpoint. So you can see this mark at the left side here. It basically specifies that the event is part of an offense, right? So if you click on the red icon here, it brings you back to the offense summary window. So we can close that. And for example, if we go into one of the events, sorry, and we scroll down, we can see under here which custom rules have contributed or matched to our event detection. So we can see that we have the building block we have created, and we have the rule itself. And this information can be used when troubleshooting, when rules are not firing as you imagine them to do. And sometimes we have building blocks or rules that match partially. So if that was the case, we would see that information right here, but for now it is empty. So in this video, we have seen the very basics of rule creation, how to choose events, how to aggregate the offense by certain types of custom properties. And of course, as the course progresses, we're going to go more in depth about each of the stations along the way. This is just a quick, brief overview at the basic level to get yourself accustomed to the terms and methodology when creating curator rules. So we've seen that our rule triggered an offense, and in later parts, we're going to see how to start investigating those offenses and basically make our capabilities as an administrator more advanced. So this was it for this video, and I will see you guys in the next one.